Vayigash elav Yehuda. And Yehuda approached him. Who did Yehuda approach? Should say Vayigash elav, Vayigash el Yosef. It doesn't, it says Vayigash elav. So the simple meaning is, well, it's obvious, because it's a continuation from last week. But the deeper Sfarim, our holy sages teach us, Vayigash elav Yehuda, Yehuda stepped up to Hashem. Yehuda stepped up to Hashem. Because the power is in Hashem's hands. I was once running trips to India, not trips to India, trips in India for Israeli backpackers who were already in India. And I'd go and I'd take them on volunteer expeditions into the mountains, into the foothills of the Himalayas. There's lots of the 60,000 Israeli backpackers every year, basically after the army, go to India. And they sit around and smoke and eat, and some of them looking into spirituality, Buddhism and Hinduism, and so I did that for 6 years myself. So I used to go and run these birthright trips for Israelis in India. So I take them into the mountains to volunteer. I speak Hindi, used to speak Hindi, and we volunteered, and then I'd do classes, Jewish meditation classes in the evening. It was an amazing trip. But I needed some funding and support, so I went to see the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, some government ministry. I said, I want this to be part of, I want you to fund it, I want you to support it. And I had a meeting with them, and I was meeting these 3 people, and someone said to me, are you nervous? And I said, well, I stand in front of Hashem 3 times a day. So why would I be nervous of these people? They have no power. Now I have to go and speak to them, I have to be polite, but really everything comes from Hashem. Vayigash elav Yehuda. Now Yehuda's name itself has Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey. Yehuda is basically got Hashem, and then he says, Vayomer bi Adoni. Simple meaning, although it's not simple, is please my master. Please my master. But deeper meaning is be in me. That's what be means, in me. Be Adoni, God is in me. You are within me, I am within you. I'm coming to you from this place of humility, where I've just filled my consciousness with God consciousness. I'm stepping up to you. Now, Yehuda steps up at this point because there's something called Midah Keneged Midah. And it's been happening throughout the whole story. Basically, they arrive in Egypt, and Yosef, disguised, they don't realize it's Yosef, is putting them through this whole balagan, taking them into prison for a few days, then sending them back, and Shimon's in prison, and then go and get Binyamin. And immediately when that happens, this is last week's Parshat, by the way, immediately when this happens, they're like, it's because we sold Yosef. We deserve this. We're being messed around, Shimon's been taken, and they say, immediately, this is happening. They're not complaining. They're saying, I know that this is happening because of what we did in the past. Very, very important to understand that things don't just happen. If something bad's happening to you, you've got to say to yourself, okay, why? What's the purpose of this? However, at the very end of last week's Parsha, Binyamin's getting taken as a slave. Now that's not fair. Binyamin didn't sell Yosef. Binyamin wasn't involved. At this point, Yehuda steps up and realizes, hold on, I'm going to take some action. I can't blame myself for this anymore. So if this isn't from me, if I don't deserve this, so to speak, then Hashem is making this happen to me for some other reason, so I've got to step up and fight this. Not everything that happens to you in your life, you just deserve it and need it for something that happened in the past. Maybe you're getting a challenge in your life for you to now step up and say, okay, Vayigash, you better step up to your issues, your problems in your life. So he stepped up, and the simple meaning, obviously, is stepping up to Yosef. But the deeper meaning is, he's stepping up to face, standing with Hashem and say, okay, Hashem, I now humbled myself. I'm tapping into my peace of Hashem. Now, who's the master of this, by the way? Yosef himself. Yosef a tzaddik, Yosef begematria Hashem imcha, Hashem is with you. That's what Yosef is. Yosef is just walking around, God conscious the whole time. Now we see this in last week's Parsha, and a few weeks Parshas ago, I think I said it in the Parsha class a couple of weeks ago, that when the whole thing happened with Potiphar's wife, he was put in prison. So the Torah says, and Yosef was put in prison, the place where the prisoners go to prison, and he was there in prison. What's the repetition? So our sages say, he was just there. He was like, okay, here I am. He wasn't like, it's not fair, I'm in prison, I don't deserve to be in prison, I don't want to be in prison, other people are in prison. He's just like, okay, if this is where I'm meant to be, and he was there in prison. Obviously the simple meaning is, he was there. But why would the Torah repeat itself? And then last week's Parsha, he's rushed out of prison. He's in the lowest of the low, in a pit under the ground for 12 years, rushed out of prison, brought in front of Pharaoh, and then Pharaoh says to him, you know what? Interpret the dreams. He does it really well. And then he says, listen, now you need to find a wise man to run the country for you. So Pharaoh looks at him and says, well, there's no one wiser than you. You're now going to be second in command of Egypt. The very next line in the Torah, Pharaoh says, see, I just made you second in line in Egypt. Why is Pharaoh repeating what he just said? So the deeper sages teach us, because the first time he said it, he said to this slave, you're going to be second in command of Egypt. Yosef said, okay then. Now you would expect him to freak out at that point. Yes! Oh my goodness, this is crazy. 5 minutes ago I was the lowest of the low, and suddenly I'm the highest of the high. You've just taken me out of the worst death row prison, and now I'm the vice president of America. That would be bad. I don't know if that's good. Whatever. Not a good example. But yeah, some reaction, but Yosef's reaction was obviously like, all right then. And Pharaoh said, didn't you hear what I just said? I just made the lowest person the highest person. And Yosef was like, yeah, whatever. If Hashem wants me in the prison, I'll be in prison. If Hashem wants me to be the most powerful person on the face of the planet, I'll be there. I'll just be where I am. It's okay. Hashem's everywhere. Everywhere I am, Hashem is. Everywhere Hashem is, that's okay. So Yosef is the master of this. Yehuda now steps into this huge, I'm going to now go and I'm facing off with Yosef. And he tells the whole story. And he says, it's not fair. Why are you doing this? And then we basically have the biggest climactic moment in the whole of, obviously the Torah, but human literature ever. This is forget Shakespeare, forget anything, Spielberg, forget Braveheart and the Shawshank Redemption. We now have the moment where Yosef reveals himself to his brothers. So they're all now standing in front of him. They've all bowed down to him a couple of times by this point, making his dream come true. And at this point, Yosef can't hold it in anymore. And they say, he clears out and he just says the most powerful words ever said by any human being ever. Vayimer Yosef al Echad, el Echad. And he says to his brothers, Ani Yosef. I am Yosef. This is the pinnacle moment in all of creation. I am Yosef. And the brothers at this point are like, now the sages in the Midrash compare this moment to the moment basically when Mashiach comes. Why? Because what's going to happen at the moment Mashiach comes is that not just your suffering comes to an end. Basically, this is what had happened here. Firstly, they were like, oh my goodness, the reality that I thought and I was living in was not the reality at all. That's one thing they thought. Number two is, I'm not going to suffer now. I'm not going to suffer. It's Yosef. Although I guess at this point they still weren't sure, maybe. But he screamed out, he's crying, he's like, Yosef. But on a deeper level, it means that the reality that you thought you were living up until now was never the reality in the first place. You were never in trouble in the first place. Not just that your troubles have come to an end now, but was Binyamin ever going to be taken as a slave? No! Were they ever going to be in prison? No! The whole balagan that was happening in their life, and there's all their stress and anxiety and tension and oh my goodness, and this is bad and this is bad, and how am I going to deal with this, and the future's this. It all Parshat just wasn't real. We're going to step into a whole different reality, and Hashem's going to be like, say, Ani Yosef, I'm Hashem. It was me all along. I was helping you. Well, Yosef, in all of these parshas, what was he doing? Was he punishing the brothers, or was he helping them? He was helping them do tshuva. That was the whole point of the whole thing. Helping them do tshuva. So at the end, Hashem's going to say, you know that thing you went through, I'm so sorry. That's why Yosef's crying. I think Hashem's going to be crying at the end. Hashem's going to be like, I'm so sorry you had to go through all that, the Holocaust and stuff. I'm sorry that happened. It's terrible. I was in your pain with you. But it's a whole different reality. We're stepping into a whole different reality. The whole of reality as we know it, we've said this a few times recently, is completely a projection of God's imagination. The universe is made up of God's consciousness. It's a simulation. We're living in this reality. And that is what Chanukah is teaching us. Was meant to Zayis Chanukah. Today is still Chanukah. By the way, is Chanukah over? No. For many people in their mind, Chanukah finished last night. I lit the candles, that was it, and then the candles burnt out, Chanukah is finished, and then this morning we chapped the final halal, it was geschmack, but now that's it. Chanukah is finished. It's not true. Zayis Chanukah is now the highest. In fact, this is the Ne'ilah. This is the final, this is the pinnacle is happening right now. And the purpose of Chanukah is lahadat ulahalel. What does that mean? To acknowledge. Lahadat means to acknowledge and to praise. Lahadat ulahalel. So to acknowledge, not just grateful and thank you for everything Hashem and therefore I'm going to praise you, but to acknowledge that the whole universe is just a projection of Hashem's consciousness. To see through the whole of the physical universe with the light of the Chanukah. You're still going to say Ala Nisim in Mincha today. And even after you say Ala Nisim in Mincha today, it's still going to be Chanukah. Until sunset, or even after sunset. Beis Hillel say on the first night you light one candle, second night 2 candles, 3 candles, and you add and you continue. You add and you continue. He never says you stop. So we don't light more candles, but you're meant to keep adding God consciousness and light and spirituality into life. Ani Yosef, I think Zot Chanukah is Ani Yosef. It's only light. First night of Chanukah, there's 1 light and 7 dark. Then you've got 2 lights, 6 dark. And everyone likes the 5th night because now there's more light than dark. But they're still dark. 8th night, there's no darkness anymore. It's not dark anymore. We got the revelation. That's why we say, Hayinu kecholmim. We were like dreamers. When Mashiach comes, when Hashem reveals Himself, we're going to realize it was all a dream. It's a dream. It's a dream. You're going through a dream. It happens to be for most people a nightmare. Not a good dream. Having a nightmare. But once you wake up from a nightmare, you realize, okay, thank God I woke up so I'm not suffering from the nightmare, but it was all a dream in the first place. There was no need to be afraid in the first place. The dream wasn't real. But what you have to do is you have to lucid dream. You have to be awake in the dream. You have to know how to live in this world in a Yosef Dika, God-conscious way. That's the whole purpose of everything that's happening. So then Yosef says to his brothers, I'm Yosef, your brother. Achichem, I am your brother. Now there's a very important word, and we see this a lot in these parshas. It's called achrayut. you know the word achrayut? Achrayut is a very important Hebrew word. It means responsibility. To take responsibility. You have to take responsibility for your brother. I'm your brother. You didn't take responsibility for me. Now, Yehuda, Vayigash Yehuda, what's he doing? He's taking responsibility for his brother. He's taking responsibility for Binyamin. In fact, he says to his father that I'll take achrayus. Don't worry. You let me take Binyamin down, I'll take achrayus. I'll look after him. Now, the word achrayut is an amazing Hebrew word. The first letter is just aleph. Aleph is one. Aleph, echad, one, we're together. The first two letters, aleph, chet, spell ach, brother. You're my brother. You have to see everyone as your brother. Then you take responsibility for me. He's my brother. The first three letters, aleph, chet, reish, spell acher, the other. You have to look after the other person. The first four letters, aleph, chet, reish, yud, spell acharai, after me. Even the people who come after me, my children and my children's children. Famous story in the Gemara about someone planting a carob tree. He said to him, what's the point of planting a carob tree? It takes 70 years to grow. You're not going to be able to benefit from the fruit. And he says, yeah, but I came into this world and there were carob trees for me to benefit from that obviously my grandfathers had planted for me. So I have to take achrayut, I have to take responsibility for the people who come achrayut, after. Then the first five letters, aleph, chet, reish, yud, vav, is acharav. After him, you've got to take care of other people's generations. And then you have the whole word, achrayut, responsibility. So it goes from the one, take responsibility for yourself, the aleph is one, me, and take responsibility for myself. It's very, very important in life that you trust yourself. Can you trust yourself? Do you know you're going to do the right thing in every situation? If you say you'll be there at 5 o'clock in the morning, can you trust yourself? You always think, I can't trust my friend, he's going to turn up on time. Can you trust yourself? If you commit to being somewhere that you're going to be there on time? Very, very, very important. If you can't trust yourself, life could become very difficult. You keep letting yourself down. Yeah?
Isn't there a mission of Vayigash or the Gemara that says you should tell me about some heart?
That's a whole different thing. That means don't think that you're perfect.
So recognize that you've got flaws, but generally have confidence.
I trust myself that even when I have flaws, I'm going to deal with my flaws. But it doesn't mean that means that I'm arrived, I'm perfect, I can't do anything wrong. No, I trust myself that I won't do anything wrong, but if I do, then I'll fix it. But in general, I'm not just like letting myself down all the time. So that's Achrayut. I am your brother. And then he says, this is why Yosef's the man. He says this. Two things. Firstly, he says, I want to find the actual word. I should have underlined this. Here. V'ata lo atem shelachtem oti heina. You didn't send me here. Ki Elokim. Hashem did it. I'm not even blaming you for it. Now, obviously, they are to blame and they're going to be in trouble. But Yosef is saying, I clearly needed to be here. Look, I'm now the king of Egypt. So he says, V'yishlacheni Elokim lifnechem. Hashem sent me. Now, this is a very, very, very important idea. I heard, just remembered. Rav Y.Y. Jacobson. Many years ago I heard. There's something called narrative therapy. You heard of narrative therapy? Narrative therapy is basically in life, you have things that happen to you, and then you have your narrative. What that means. My mum was late for picking me up from school. That means she doesn't really love me enough. Because what mother would be late? And it means I'm not a lovable person. And then, now the truth is, she just got stuck in traffic. It's not her fault. Now, most of your issues in life are you've just created stories and scenarios. I left her a message 40 minutes ago and she hasn't replied yet. That means that she doesn't like me and she's with another guy. It's like, what are you talking about? No one likes me. I have no friend. What? So we basically have a narrative on our life. Now, I say this is the difference between Pain and suffering. Pain is, I have an emotion, an unpleasant emotion. Suffering is a narrative that I give. It means I'm not good enough. This means you're interpreting it. Narrative therapy is changing the narrative. Not saying there's something wrong with me, maybe, but saying that other person is irresponsible. They were late because they were nothing to do with me. The ultimate story that I know of this, I also feel I told it in this class the other day, but there are new people, so it's good. Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs adopted. So when he was, I don't know how old, 12, 13, however old he was, his adoptive parents sat him down and said, I just want you to know that you're adopted, we're not your real parents. So he said, he tells this story, he says, my first impact was, oh my goodness, I've been abandoned by my parents. It must mean I'm lovable. How could a parent give up their child? I'm abandoned and unlovable. But then he said the next thought was, hold on a second, these people who are not even my real parents, they chose me and they love me. So that means I'm chosen and lovable. So he had these two stories in his head. Abandoned, unlovable, chosen and lovable. Now which one of those two stories is true? It's either only the second one. We know for a fact the second one's true. He was chosen and loved. Or both. Actually, turns out, apparently later, that his parents were very young and religious in some way and were forced to give him away. So it wasn't actually true. But let's say it was true. He said, at that moment, I had to choose which story to live with. Am I going to live with this story, I'm abandoned and unlovable? Or am I going to live with the story that I'm chosen and lovable? So he said, I'm chosen and lovable, because that's the real story. Even if they're both true, by the way. You've got to choose what stories are you living with. So, this is what Yosef did. He changed the narrative. He wasn't living in a narrative of victim. You sold me into slavery. Being sold into slavery is you're a victim. V'yishlecheni Elokim livnechem. Hashem sent me here. That means I've got purpose. There's a reason I've come here, and that's to help you. And that's very, very empowering. Rather than being a helpless victim to what happened in his life, he switched it. Now you can only make that switch in a real way if you believe that Hashem is with you. If you're Yosef, Hashem. So now in your life, what can you learn from this? You can learn from, don't be a helpless victim. You switch your narrative. And you say, now by the way, you can have both narratives because they might be both true. Something terrible did happen to you. So, Shalom Aleichem, something terrible did happen to you. But there's something you can learn from that. There's some way you can grow from that. We believe that that's the thing that you needed to go through in this life as a test to bring you to a higher level of being a tzaddik, for example. Yosef himself. Yosef, we spoke 2-3 weeks ago. He's called a tzaddik because he completely was tested in these two major areas. We said 2 weeks ago of gaiva and taiva. He had a physical craving. He was very beautiful and curling his hair and a beautiful coat. He was very into physicality, and he was showing off about his dreams. So he had these two things, and he got tested big time. In his mind, he was like, maybe I got sent into Egypt to fix these character flaws in myself. And he got tested with Potiphar's wife in the physical, material sense. He got tested with his brothers in the ego sense. They all bowed down to him, and he could have said, I'm right, you're wrong, and he didn't. So he himself understood that his whole journey into Egypt and into the pit and out of the pit, that's why he wasn't freaking out when he went into the pit, and he didn't freak out when he got out of the pit. He said, okay, this is what I need to be going through right now. How am I going to become a greater, better person? So this is a beautiful face-off between Yehuda and Yosef. Yehuda and Yosef, these two characters, where they've now come to this. Yehuda's got Hashem's name in it. Yosef is Hashem is with you. Yehuda is stepping up to Hashem. It's all Hashem. It's all Hashem. This is what the 8th day of Chanukah is saying. Zot Chanukah. Zot. Zot is a word we use when we point towards something. Zeh or Zot. Zeh. Zot. So there's going to come a time where we'll be able to point to Hashem. We'll be able to point to spirituality. Zeh keli v'anveil. It says when the sea was splitting, the children who were supported by Hashem, and it said, hold on, this is Hashem. Zeh keli v'anveil. This is my God and I will beautify him. So that's what's going to happen at the end of days. Don't wait till the end of days though. Don't wait. Do it now. Vayigash. Elav. You have to step up to Hashem with the Yehuda, with the Hashem within you. Be Adoni. Hashem is within me. So you have to find that inner Hashem within you. That means your soul, your neshama, your pure part. And with that you can step up to Hashem and find that in the world now. Bezat Hashem. Shabbos.